Welcome to this week's episode of Talk of the Town. My name is Philip Swicegood, and I am back with my good friend Dr. Kenneth Harper from Vein Specialist of the South, coming to you from one of the most historic locations in downtown Macon, and that is the museum at Capricorn Recording Studio. Countless chart-topping singles have been written right here within these walls by some of the top artists that have ever existed, and they've been written right here. Joining us today is Larry Brumley, who is the Senior Vice President at Mercer University, and we are so excited to have our conversation with him about the Capricorn Recording Studio. Larry, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Larry, tell us a little bit about the museum and about Capricorn, about what made Mercer want to come alongside and partner with the community.
Well, it's a long story, and there's not enough time on this TV show. So basically, this building was originally purchased by Mercer in the late 90s by Dr. Kirby Godsey when he was president of Mercer. He knew it was an important site and purchased it to try and preserve it. And then a few years later, President Underwood came along, 2006, and some developers approached him about buying it from the university to do something with it in the building next door and turn it into a boutique hotel. So the university sold it to these developers, and then the Great Recession hit, and they lost the building to bankruptcy, and it started falling into real disrepair. It was really falling apart, and then the Peyton Anderson Foundation stepped in and provided a grant to Newtown Macon to put a new roof on it and stabilize the building while they figured out what to do with it. In the meantime, another developer came and approached President Underwood about building the loft apartments that are currently around Capricorn, and so he effected a purchase of the building from Newtown Macon and gave it back to the university along with some cash to start a fundraising campaign for it. And so that was in 2015. It took us about 4 years to get this open.
Wow. Now, so you were tasked by President Underwood to kind of head up this project in many regards. And tell us about your initial dreams for what might occur here, what President Underwood was interested in, and some of your passion.
Well, it's a big complex. It's 20,000 square feet, and even in the 70s, during its heyday, Capricorn Recording Studios, the sound studios, did not use most of this building. Where we're sitting right now is just storage space. And so, when we got into it, the primary components that President Underwood wanted to see happen was the music incubator. He really felt like that Macon could benefit from having some rehearsal rooms and a space downtown where musicians could rehearse and collaborate and cultivate, incubate that next, round of talent, the next Allman Brothers or next Otis Redding. And so that was really the linchpin of the project. And then, of course, the historic recording studio, which was amazingly well preserved given the condition of the rest of the building. And so it started there. And then what do we do with all this other space that's here? And so I advocated for a museum. I felt like the Capricorn story was very compelling and needed to be told and interpreted for people in the context of Macon's rich music heritage. And so I lobbied for the museum and for the office space and conference center that's up here. And so that's kind of how that came to be.
That's an amazing story. So had you ever been in charge of trying to create a museum before?
I have not worked directly on a museum before, but I've worked on other projects that have parallels. Right. And so I first started doing research and looking around what are some models that we could emulate. And I guess really the initial inspiration happened many years before we decided to take on this project when I went out to Los Angeles to watch the Mercer men's basketball team play UCLA. Right. While I was there, I went to the Grammy Museum in downtown. It had just been open for a few years, and was really impressed with they had interactive digital exhibits, and one of them was a flat screen, touch screen monitor with a map of the United States that showed major music cities around the country, and there was Macon, Georgia, that had a pin drop. I thought, wow. And so you touch that, and up pops Capricorn Records and Phil Walden. And I knew about that, but I just didn't. It didn't hit me until then how influential Macon is in terms of the music landscape in this country, and how the kind of impact it had on American culture. It birthed the genre of Southern rock, and so I just felt like that story needed to be told.
Right. When we look at throughout history, music has played such a big role in society and in culture. So what is it about this music that was created here that you have ties to?
Well, I mean, given my age, it just so happens that the music that came out of Capricorn Records in the 70s coincided with my teenage years, and so really the music of Capricorn is kind of the soundtrack of my youth. And so I listen to the Allman Brothers and Marshall Tucker Band and Charlie Daniels and Elvin Bishop and all these great acts that Wet Willie that recorded here, and so I had a very intense personal interest in it because of that.
Can you give us a kind of a greatest hits of some of the people that have actually recorded here in the past? Because I would imagine not everyone is intimately familiar with everyone that has actually recorded a song here.
Well, I just reeled off several of them. Allman Brothers Band, of course. This was they were in here first when Phil Walden brought Dwayne Allman to Macon and asked him to put together a band. And then, of course, Marshall Tucker Band recorded a lot of albums here. Wet Willie, Charlie Daniels did a lot of recording here. Bonnie Bramlett, and then some lesser known acts, but still pretty influential. Cowboy and Grinder Switch and others whose music still has some legs. It's kind of a niche, but there are still people who listen to a lot of that music that was recorded here.
We listen to a lot of music when we're working on people's legs.
Yeah.
It's the patient's choice. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing how even the younger generations, the 30-year-olds, love this music.
Oh, it's timeless.
It's not mm-hmm. just folks my age, mm-hmm. but whether it's in other music that was created in Macon. So what an opportunity to preserve that.
Yeah, and it's a great story. So it needed to be told and preserved.
When you started traveling around, where did you visit to say these are really like world-class museums and things that you would pick from one or the other? How did that influence what this is today, the museum?
Well, certainly the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles was kind of my first exposure to what we could possibly do here. But we traveled to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and visited the Muscle Shoals Sound Studios and Fame Studios. They're not really museums like what we have here. They're iconic places, but they're still working recording studios like Capricorn is, and they don't have quite the array of exhibits we have here. But Stax in Memphis is another one that has an extensive, a lot more artifacts than we have here, and a larger museum. We visited there. The Country Music Hall of Fame in Nashville, of course, is a well-known music museum. So those were the ones we kind of looked at and tried to pattern this after. In some, in case of Stax and the Country Music Hall of Fame, it's on a much smaller scale.
Right. Tell us, whenever you went out west, you said that you were in, I believe it was LA, and there was the digital component of that museum that so stood out to you, and you saw Macon on the map and you're able to click on that, and it sounds like that you guys have incorporated some of that into this museum. What can someone expect from the digital side of things whenever they come here?
Well, because we don't have a lot of square footage here to devote to the museum, we had to really put most of the storytelling into digital kiosks. Fortunately, music lends itself well to that, and so we put out an RFQ and had about 8 companies across the country bid on this project, and we selected a firm out of Richmond, Virginia called Riggs Ward, and they came in and they took the interpretive plan that was developed by Jared Wright, who is a local musician and Mercer graduate and a public historian, has a master's in museum studies. He really wrote the interpretive plan. He knows more about the history of Capricorn than any human being I've met. I mean, he has researched it. He literally wrote his master's thesis on Capricorn. So we hired him to write the interpretive plan. And so he basically put together the story. This is how we're going to tell the story of Capricorn. You have these themes in there. That came from Jared Wright. Riggs Ward took it and had the creative vision to take it and turn it into this interactive experience. And so they really designed the digital exhibits. They designed all the exhibit area with the artifacts. But the heart of the museum are these digital kiosks that, in addition to having the entire Capricorn record library that you can sample and listen to, put headphones on and listen to tracks from all the records that were recorded at Capricorn, that were recorded under the Capricorn Records label. There are also photos and scans of documents and all kinds of materials that tell the Capricorn story, but there is also messaging that weaves it all together.
Larry, tell us a little bit about the artifacts that you have here. Where did they come from? We heard there were some that were in the building when y'all started renovating, but what's the story behind some of that? And if you have something you think might be of interest, is the museum have an interest in knowing what you might have?
Well, they've come from a variety of sources. Some of them were donated to us. Jared Wright, again, the historian who put together the interpretive plan for the museum, had been really all across the country and examined some of these artifacts and had relationships with collectors who had various parts. After Capricorn went bankrupt, a lot of their stuff just kind of scattered to the four winds, and different collectors bought it, and so he knew where most of this stuff was, and some of it's on loan from the Big House Museum. Some of it individual collectors have loaned to us. Some of the pieces were donated to us by collectors. So it's come from a variety of sources. All of the material that's scanned and that's in the digital kiosks was borrowed and scanned and given back to the individuals who owned them.
So there's some pretty amazing artwork down here too. Tell us about some of the Penley artwork that we have you're displaying. Penley's also a Macon native, a native son of Macon. Can you share
That's
a little
right,
bit about
Steve
some
Penley.
of that?
We have several of his works that are related to Capricorn throughout the facility. They're on loan from the Peyton Anderson Foundation, who owns these paintings. There's one, a large one in Studio B of the Allman Brothers Band, but we also have Penleys of Little Richard and Otis Redding and Dwayne Allman in different places in the facility.
Talk to us about opening the museum and what it's been like, because it sounds like you guys opened right before COVID, and how many visitors you guys have been able to have, and anything else along those lines.
Well, we opened in January of 2020, and then, of course, in mid-March, COVID pandemic hit, and we had to shut down. But we reopened in June of 2020. But we haven't had the amount of traffic that we were expecting because of COVID, and we're still dealing with the impact of COVID on tourism. But just, with all that we're dealing with, we've had visitors from 40 states and 9 foreign countries come through the museum.
Wow. So it sounds like there's a very specific set of people internationally that are interested in visiting locations like this, the one in Muscle Shoals, the one in Memphis, and the one in LA. Oh,
absolutely. That was one of the things when Jared and I went to Memphis to visit Stax and Sun Records. We were at Sun Records one morning, and there were people in there from the UK, from Germany. I mean, people travel from all over the world to see these places because they're iconic. They produce music that had this, kind of impact on people there that had, the impact on us here in the U.S. And so it's that was one of the surprising things to me, how many people internationally make pilgrimages to these sites. Right. And one of our first visitors that we had here when we opened up came from the Netherlands. I mean, he was like the 10th person that came through the museum after we opened. Traveled here he was seeing some other places, but he was here at Capricorn. He knew all about the Capricorn record story. Really? And so, if you go through our guest book and read the comments that people leave, they are uniformly extremely positive. Just people are blown away by the experience of interacting with that history of Capricorn records.
Larry, I think one of the things I love about this museum is it's so modern and it displays the history so well. But as soon as you walk through those doors and you go in the recording studio, it's like taking a step back in time. You know, it looks exactly like it did the day that all of those famous guys were actually in there recording, and I just think that's so cool.
Yeah, and the Capricorn alumni who came back for the dedication told us it not only looks the same as it did when they record there, it smells the same. So somehow we were able to preserve the smell as well. I don't know.
It's baked into those curves.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So back earlier this year, we had one of our staff outings from our company, Vein Specialists of the South, and we came over. It's just a half a block over across the street, but it's our first outing after COVID. The staff had a great time. They got to do the interactive music. They were listening to music, and you could see them. They were singing and dancing, and to see the studio. And a couple of our members who could play the piano were in there. They were playing and singing. And it was a magical day. And tell us what you would like to see happen now that we're kind of getting through COVID. What your vision is for Macon, for the museum, for music, and how the museum is going to be at the center of a lot of that.
Well, we actually, even despite COVID, have had a number of corporate events here, and it was built and designed with that in mind. Studio B it can be a recording studio, it can be a live performance space, but it also is a nice space for corporate events, and we've had a number of here since we opened. And you can rent, just Studio B, or you can rent Studio B and the bar area next door and have catered food and beverages. Or you can rent all the studio and the bar area and the museum and have it open for your, the guests at your corporate event. And usually even the studio is accessible if there's not recording going on there. It's a unique experience for corporate events and parties. We've had some people rent the facility out for birthday parties. They're birthday parties for older people, obviously, not for kids. We've had a pretty steady line of business there, and that it was designed for that. It was designed to be rented out for corporate events and parties and special events.
So if you were, what's the range of number of folks that could have an event here? If you were planning a party, what are you seeing as far as that's concerned?
Well, I think we've had groups up here as many as 300 people. It's pretty cozy when you get 300 people in here. Historic Macon had their patrons party here in January 2020, and I think we were pressing 400 people at that event. It's obviously you can't have seated service there, but it probably, I'd say up to 300. It just depends on the kind of event you're having. If it's an event where people, have hors d'oeuvres and people can circulate, then you can get more people, obviously, than if you have a seated dinner.
Right.
Now, Larry, going back to the literal museum itself, Vein Specialists is a very pro-family organization. And, I would imagine that this is a great location to bring kids to be able to come, to be able to share a different experience. Is that something you guys have had much of? Many families coming through the door?
Oh, we've had some. The audience tends to skew older, but we've had a full range of people in there. We had one of the bands that rented the studio to record was a family band out of South Carolina. That the band was made up of I think the family members ranged anywhere from 8 years to 18 years, and the father, and it was a family band. They booked the studio. They wanted to record in Capricorn.
What genre of music were they playing?
I don't remember it. It was fairly early on after we opened that they came over, but it wasn't heavy metal. I can tell you that.
So sometimes you think about museums, you think about memorabilia. What can people purchase here that you find that they might want to take home with them?
Well, T-shirts are the most popular items that are sold in the gift shop, but they have coffee mugs and koozies and lighters and various other things with a Capricorn mark on them, but the T-shirts are most popular.
Right.
Talk to us about the hours at the museum. When is it open?
The museum is open Wednesday through Sundays. On Wednesdays and Thursdays, it's open from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. On Fridays and Saturdays, it's open from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m., Sunday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then studio tours are given at 10 a.m. on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, unless there's something, the recording going on in Studio A, which is not usually the case at 10 a.m.
So, but on the other days, you can rent it out. It might be available on other days.
To rent out for events,
Right.
yeah. Sometimes the museum will close early if we have a private event here. So we're pretty flexible, you know, we will work around things. Unless we've got a big recording project going on here, there's usually, you know, a way to work around things.
Can you go to the website and look at events coming up, or you make a phone call down, or how do you set something up?
Well, the best thing is go to the website, capricorn.mercer.edu, and it has all the information about how to rent it, what the rates are, who to contact about that. It's all on the website.
Now, there are all these legends about Allman Brothers and the other bands recording here. And if you go on the Rock Candy Tour, you hear some of those stories. Do you have any favorite stories that are things that happened here in the studio that you'd like to share?
Well, there's some I can't share publicly, but I mean, I've heard a lot of those stories over the last few years working on this project. One of the best ones that I heard told was Tommy Talton, who was one of the original members of Cowboy, was really the house band for Capricorn. But he was telling us about Joe Cocker being here, recording with Bonnie Bramlett, and they were trying to record this album for Bonnie Bramlett, and Joe Cocker was so drunk they had to just lay him down on the floor and bend the boom mic down to him to sing because he couldn't stand up. So, and we've got pictures of Joe Cocker in the control room with Bonnie Bramlett that is in the collection, but that's one of the wilder ones. But, you know, I've been told that Paul McCartney came through here. He didn't record here, but he came through here. James Taylor spent time in this building. His brothers, Livingston Taylor and I can't remember his other brother, Alex Taylor, both recorded here, and so James Taylor came through, Joni Mitchell. I mean, there have been some people come through here who didn't record here, but made cameo appearances.
That's neat. Now, what do we see in the incubator? Are we seeing some folks over there who might be the next big name in music? I mean, I know President Underwood's vision is for that to happen, and the active live music scene in Macon to be spurred on by what's happening here.
Not yet, but it's early.
Right.
So time will tell. But the rehearsal rooms are all rented. They stay rented. There's usually a waiting list. It's an interesting mix of musicians who are over there. A lot of it's hip hop.
Right.
Hip hop is very hot genre right now, and so we're having a lot of hip hop artists come through. But there's some more traditional rock type musicians over there that are hanging out. But time will tell.
Are there lessons, or do you just come and practice? And how do you, if you're interested, how do you get on the schedule?
Well, again, go to the website, capricorn.mercer.edu, and there's a section for the incubator where you can fill out an interest form. And then it's actually run by Andrew Eck. He runs the incubator part of Mercer Music and Capricorn. But, it's, again, it's early and time will tell. But that we did expect that some of those rooms would be used for music instruction, like guitar lessons or whatever, but that really hasn't turned out that way. They're all being rented by practicing musicians, and they're in there. It's open. It's available 24/7. There's card access, so musicians can come anytime, day or night, and it's really pretty self-contained over there.
Now, there's stories about in the basement. There's kind of an echo chamber somewhere where people some of the old guys used to go down there and record. Is that really true?
Well, they are reverb chambers that were built when the studio was originally conceived in 1969. There are 4 of them, and they're different sizes and shapes. And they would put amps down there. They're lined with tile, ceramic tile, and they'd put amps down there and mic them, and it would create that reverb that was kind of a signature of historic rock. Yeah. And they're still working. They still use them today. They've been cleaned up, and some musicians come and want to get that reverb that old-fashioned way. And, you know, a lot of times that reverb today is created digitally, but there's some people who like to go old school and do it the old-fashioned way, and so they'll put amps down there and mic them, and you get that you know, natural reverb.
Right.
So
it's going to be so neat years, decades from now, whenever there's a Mercer student that has come on the actual music scene and has made it big, and they can say, hey, I got my start at Mercer University at the Capricorn Recording Studio. You know, that to me is when all of this will be worth it, and it'll be just a great moment for Macon.
Absolutely. And Macon and Mercer are so intertwined. The influence of the university on the city over the last 30 years has been tremendous, and it only gets better. And
well,
so I personally would like to thank you on behalf of the community for what involvement y'all have had to make life a better place and making a better place to live.
Well, our students and faculty and staff live here too, and so it's in our best interest to do that.
So really quick, can you give us one more time where if people want to find out more information about this place, where they can go?
Capricorn.mercer.edu.
Fantastic. Larry, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you guys for joining us as well. We are so excited to have Larry. Again, check them out. Look up more information about Capricorn Recording Studios and this gorgeous brand new museum that's here. And stay tuned for where you might see myself and Dr. Harper. You never know where that might be.
I'm a respiratory therapist, 33-year-old mother of 2, with one of my children having medical needs. I enjoy being outside with my family, and I enjoy riding horses as one of my personal pastimes. After having 2 children, my varicose veins were really painful, and I knew I needed help in order to keep up with my busy lifestyle. That's when I reached out to the only accredited vein center in Central Georgia, Vein Specialists of the South. Meeting with the VSS team, they listened to my concerns and developed a treatment plan perfect for me and my hectic schedule. During my procedure, I could tell the staff truly cared about me and what they do. The procedure was really quick. They put on my favorite music and made me feel completely comfortable the entire time. Recovery was easy, and I was glad I didn't wait. And most of all, it was covered by my insurance. Now, there's nothing stopping this mommy from living her best life. If you need vein care, I encourage you to call Vein Specialists of the South today.